I'm Ingrid Matthews, and I'm a Baroque violinist. That is to say, my first career has been in early music, also known as historical performance. I directed the Seattle Baroque Orchestra for 19 years and have performed and recorded extensively around the world with other groups too. But for the first probably decade of my musical career, I was also pursuing kind of a stealth education in visual art, which has been a lifelong passion for me. I started showing my work about 10 years ago, and by now it's reached the point where if someone asks me what I do, I honestly don't know what to say first. I'm a Baroque violinist or I'm an abstract painter. But the wonderful and interesting thing, and the topic at hand, is how those two really inform each other, as different as they may seem. I really believe that my work as an artist has made me a better musician and vice versa. I received my musical training at the Historical Performance Institute at the Jacobs School of Music, Indiana University, and I will always be grateful for the musical priorities that were instilled in me there. I learned so much about performance practice and scholarship, but if I had to name one overarching lesson that I took away, it would have to do with the paramount importance of the so-called doctrine of affect. This was the idea explicitly stated by 17th century musicians and somewhat radically humanistic at the time, that music could and should make us feel something. It should evoke an emotional response. And therefore, the musician's job is, first of all, to be clear on what we want to make the listener feel, how we want to make the listener feel, and secondly, to cultivate our powers to do that. So this is a value that I have very much carried over into visual art. And in both cases, it's how we do that where the magic really happens. I remember vividly the excitement I felt when I was first discovering 17th century facsimiles, music facsimiles. This is printed music which has basically no instructions. There are no dynamic markings, no interpretive markings, sometimes not even consistent bar lines. So as a musician, you're just confronted with pitch and rhythm with which to make meaning, to evoke that emotional response. And I found that thrilling. I still do, and it's very similar to the excitement that I feel around abstract art, in which we have basically color and shape with which to create meaning. And by the way, with music, it's always abstract. You can't hear a piece of music and think, oh, I get it, it's a house, it's a boat. No, the affect is the meaning. And that's why I think for me there's such a direct line from music to abstract art. And in fact, whether we are talking about musical tones stacked up and arranged in certain rhythms, or colors stacked up and arranged in certain shapes, in both cases we're really just talking about basically elements of nature, elements of physics. It's wavelengths of light or wavelengths of sound. So on a certain deep level, the work is really the same. It's really the same, only while music originates in time, visual art originates in space. But the similarities aren't all on this kind of metaphysical level. I run into them everywhere when I'm working, all the time, and I always find them fascinating. For instance, color theory is very similar to musical harmony in that colors take on meaning relative to each other in the context of the color wheel, the same way musical tones take on meaning relative to each other in the context of the scale. And this brings up the concepts of consonance and dissonance in both art forms. With music, the same chord can be transposed to a higher or lower octave, similar to how the same color relationship can be transposed to a higher octave by adding white or a lower octave by adding black. In both cases, the higher or lower frequencies have a lot of bearing on the affect, the emotional content. In both art and music, there is compositional structure or form to consider, as well as areas of improvisation. There is transparency and opacity. There's the nuance of line. Musicians make decisions about balance, the way artists make decisions about what should be in the foreground and what should be pushed back. A violin bow and a paintbrush have in common that they can both be used with an infinite combination of speeds and pressures to create different effects, which leads me to the overall physicality. I think in both practices, it's hard to make anything beautiful if your muscles are clenched or you're holding your breath. So in both cases, I think we're always looking for that perfect balance between meticulous control and joyful abandon. So this is a nutshell version of something I could talk about all day. If you have thoughts about any of this, I would love to hear from you. And in the meantime, I will leave you with a little slideshow and some Bach. Thank you.
Thank you.